In this episode, we will talk about the 3 different children that were abused and tortured to death by their parents. 3 different cases that everyone knew of the abuse, and even when they reported the abuse, the authorities did nothing to protect them. Warning: this episode talks about torture, child abuse, and rape. Paul Fernandez was born on August 29 of 1983 to Robert and Sandra Fernandez. During her childhood, her father was in and out of prison. Pearl later said that her mother beat her and that she felt no love from her mother. Pearl ran away from home when she was 11 and started drinking and taking drugs when she was 9. She was diagnosed with depressive disorder, development disability, possible personality disorder, possible PTSD. Her family described her as aggressive, controlling, and even threatened Arnold with a knife, for which she faced a domestic violence charge. Gabriel Fernandez, who was 8 years old, was abused and tortured to death at the hands of his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isauro Aguirre. Gabriel Fernandez was born on February of 2005. He was the 3rd child of Pearl Fernandez and Arnold Contreras. His older siblings were Ezekiel and Virginia. In 2009, Gabriel moved in with his maternal grandparents because his grandfather didn't accept Michael's and David's relationship. Based on interviews in the documentary, Gabriel was a happy child who liked to help and wanted the love of his family. In 2012, Pearl received custody of Gabriel. He lived with his mother, his 2 siblings, Ezekiel and Virginia, and his mother's boyfriend, Isauro. Pearl may have neglected her other children at times in their lives, and possibly even hit Virginia once, but Gabriel was the target of her anger. For 8 months, Gabriel was beaten, shot with a BB gun, his teeth pulled out with a stick, burned with cigarettes. He spent days and nights with a sock over his mouth, his hands tied, a bandana covering his face, and cuffs around his ankles, locked in a cupboard in Pearl's room. At school, they noticed that he had scabs on his scalp, and pieces of hair missing, bruises all over his face, and burns. His teacher, Jennifer Garcia, contacted the child abuse hotline, and the case was handed over to a social worker, Stephanie Rodriguez. Although Stephanie and other professionals visited Gabriel's home several times, the social workers couldn't find any strong signs of child abuse to justify taking Gabriel out of the house. They took the mother at her word and didn't ask to see Gabriel. And the times they did speak to him, Pearl was always there. Between 2003 and 2012, more than 60 accusations were made against Pearl and Isauro. These complaints generated 8 investigations by Child Protective Service and the Department of Children and Family Service. However, both agencies claim that all but one of the accusations were unfounded. On May 22, 2013, Pearl called 911 because Gabriel wasn't breathing. The paramedics who responded found Gabriel had a cracked skull, broken ribs, and BB gun balls stuck in his body. He was taken to the hospital and later declared brain dead, and his death was declared on May 24 of 2013. It was so violent that when the investigator began to mark the places where there was blood in the house, he had to use two cameras. During the trial, Ezekiel and Virginia testified about the abuse Gabriel suffered and that Pearl and Isaro called Gabriel gay and punished him for playing with dolls and displaying feminine qualities. In court, it was proven that they abused Gabriel during the time he was in their care and that they tortured him to death. In 2018, Isaro was sentenced to death following a conviction for first-degree murder with the special circumstance of painful murder by torture. To avoid the death penalty, Pearl pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During Isaro's trial, the jury wasn't unanimous. 11 found him guilty, while one man didn't believe he should be convicted of first-degree murder. He thought that if Isaro had wanted to kill Gabriel, he would have done it a long time ago. When the jury asked for the death penalty, it was the same juror who voted against it, because he felt it was necessary to listen to Isaro.
Well, the verdict was handed down today for the man accused of torturing his girlfriend's 8-year-old son to death.
KCAL 9's Dave Lopez is live inside the courthouse in downtown L.A., where it didn't take long for jurors to deliver their verdict. Dave?
No, on just about 6 hours, and that was with a short day yesterday. At the beginning of this trial, the prosecutor told the jury that the little Gabriel Fernandez, 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, would not be able to come in, sit down on the witness chair, and tell his story of abuse and the torture he went through for the last 8 months of his life. He wouldn't be able to do that. He said, I have to do that job, and you have to listen, and you have to listen to the facts and embrace them. And that's what the jury did. They found him guilty, and guilty of the special circumstance of torture.
Guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree. We further find the allegation that said murder was committed intentionally and involved the infliction of torture.
Isaro Aguirre, now a convicted man facing the possibility of the death penalty, never made a move, never looked anywhere but straight ahead, never flinched, never shed a tear.
I was asking the jurors for justice for Gabriel.
For Gabriel Fernandez, the 8-year-old little boy who was brutally tortured, badly mistreated for 8 months before he died in May of 2013, tortured by Aguirre and, according to the prosecution, by his own mother, Pearl Fernandez, who will go on trial for the murder-torture of her little boy sometime next year. Aguirre's defense attorneys tried to convince the jury that because he cried, because he wanted to know how little Gabriel was the night that he died, that showed remorse. With remorse, you cannot show premeditation, thus no torture. But the jury wasn't convinced at all, taking less than 6 hours to not only find first-degree murder, but the special circumstance of torture.
We tried to address that in our first closing because we knew that was going to be or could be an issue. I trust in the jury system.
After the verdict, Hatami briefly hugged the biological father of Gabriel, who was in prison for most of Gabriel's 8 years. He said, "What I said to him was private." He also hugged members of his prosecution team. He said this was a very hard-fought, difficult trial, an emotional trial. And he kept saying, I'm doing this for Gabriel's memory. 2 months before he died, Gabriel wrote a suicide note. The jury saw it. Part of what he wrote in his handwriting, Mom, I still love you. Gabriel is a good boy.
It was during the trial that evidence came out that every time Gabriel was beaten, they kept saying that you're no good, you're not worth living, you're a bad boy. That's the note, I'm a good boy. What happens next? They take a break, same jury, 7 women, 5 men. They now begin what is called the penalty phase. That begins on November 27th. What's determined in that is the defendant, Aguirre, will it be life or death? The jury must decide on that. Back to you in the studio.
All right.
Before reading out the sentence, Judge George Momemi said, "You want to say that the conduct was animalistic, but that would be wrong because even animals know how to look after their young, some to the point of sacrificing their own lives when looking after their young. I can only hope that in the middle of the night you wake up and think about the injuries you have caused this poor 7-year-old child and that it tortures you."
Hello, I'm Peter Dowd. Our top story on KCAL 9 News at noon, life in prison and death. Those are the sentences for a Palmdale mother and stepfather for the brutal murder of 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez. KCAL 9's Cara Finstrom has more on this breaking story from downtown LA.
We're talking about the two very people who should have protected Gabriel Fernandez most. Today, the judge sentenced the mother to life in prison without the possibility of parole and her boyfriend to death. Then the judge went on to do something he said he rarely does. He talked personally about the brutal murder, which he said was the most horrific he's seen in all his years on the bench.
The repeated beatings, burning, starving, binding, shooting Gabriel with BBs that were embedded in different parts of his body, knocking his teeth out with a bat, locking him in a dark cabinet while he's bound, and starving this poor child. It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured. And from what I heard, Gabriel was a kind, loving individual who just wanted to be loved. You know, I can only wish, I really do, that you both, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you think of the injuries that you subjected this poor young man, and that it tortures you.
The judge also said he doesn't believe Pearl Fernandez and 37-year-old Isario Aguirre are even capable of feeling true remorse. Aguirre was found guilty by a jury. They recommended the death penalty. It's very rare in California. The last execution here was 11 years ago. During the trial, prosecutors called him an evil man who liked torturing Gabriel, who he thought acted like he was gay. Shortly after Aguirre's conviction, Pearl Fernandez struck a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Today, both sat stone-faced. At one point, Pearl Fernandez spoke. She said she wished she could have saved Gabriel, then criticized extended family who've come forward to honor him, saying they never really knew him. Gabriel's first-grade teacher also spoke. She saw signs of abuse and went to authorities trying to get help. Now she says she's racked with guilt and sadness.
For the last 5 years, Gabriel has been number 28 in my classroom. I don't assign number 28 to another student because I feel it is only his number now. And it's a way for me to honor him in my classroom. It almost makes it like he's still here. I find comfort in believing he is now at peace.
Today, Gabriel's biological father, who's serving time for robbery and other charges and says he feels guilty for not being there for his son, was brought into the courtroom and asked to watch the sentencing in his cell. Gabriel's death sparked outrage across the South, and it spurred changes within both law enforcement and child protective services. Unprecedented criminal charges were also filed against 2 former social workers and their supervisors. They're accused of repeatedly ignoring abuse and are awaiting trial. Now, at the same time, this was a packed courtroom today. There were many supporters of little Gabriel Fernandez who came. They wore T-shirts, which on the front said, "Justice is served," and on the back said, "We're not done yet." Reporting here from downtown LA, Cara Finstrom, KCAL 9 News.
The 2 social workers, Stephanie Rodriguez and Patricia Clement, and supervisors, Gregory Merritt and Kevin Baum, face criminal charges after being fired, something that had never happened before. They were charged with felony child abuse and falsification of public records, but that case was dismissed after an appeals court panel concluded that the four never had the necessary duty to control the abusers and did not have the care or custody of Gabriel. At her sentencing hearing, Pearl Fernandez read a letter in which she asked her children to forgive her. "I won't say how sorry I am for what happened. I wish Gabriel were alive. Every day I wish he had made better choices. I'm sorry for my children and I want them to know that I love them." As part of his February 2008 plea, Pearl waived his rights to appeal. But in petition filed on April 1st, she asked the judge to review her sentence due to changes in state law affecting some people convicted of murder under theories where there was no intent to kill, including felony murder or a theory of natural and probable consequences. Pearl indicated in the petition that she was not her son's actual killer and that she did not act with the intent to kill or assist in his murder. She also stated that she was not a major participant in the crime or that she did not act with reckless disregard for human life during the crime. A Lake County Superior Court Judge George Romeli, who presided over the murder trial, said at a hearing that he reviewed the petition and concluded that Pearl had no right to a grievance. "I have established by her own admission during her guilty plea that the murder was intentional and involved the infliction of torture over a period of several months." George Romeli adds that the record supports the theory that Pearl was one of the main participants in the murder of a child. In the last episode of the documentary The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez on Netflix, we learn the stories of two children who were tortured and killed by their own parents. Anthony Avalos was 10 and Noah Cuatro was 4, and both live in the same area as Gabriel. In 2018, Anthony suffered a brain hemorrhage after his mother, Heather Barron, and her boyfriend, Karim Ernesto Leiva, picked him up and dropped him, hitting his head on the floor. He died in hospital shortly after being admitted on June 21 of 2018. Anthony was whipped with a belt and a rope in the shape of a noose. Hot sauce was poured on his face. He was burned with cigarettes. He was forbidden to use the toilet. He was starved and thrown against walls and furniture. He was forced to kneel on grains of rice as punishment. His mother boyfriend encouraged Anthony's brothers to fight and beat him up. At one point, Anthony couldn't walk, lay unconscious on the floor of his room for hours, received no medical attention, and couldn't eat on his own, said Jonathan Atami, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney. Like Gabriel, Anthony was covered in bruises and burns when he arrived at Meadow Children's Hospital.
Developing story right now, the Lancaster mother and her boyfriend accused in the death of her 10-year-old son could face the death penalty. Heather Barron and Karim Leiva just appeared in court this morning. The judge told them if they're convicted, they could face the death penalty. They're charged with the murder of Anthony Avalos. He died in June after prosecutors say he suffered several days of extreme torture. Other family members have filed a lawsuit against the Department of Children and Family Services, and their attorney talked outside the courtroom this morning and said the decision was the first step toward justice.
He was defenseless in that home. There is evidence that this little boy was laying on the floor for nearly 2 days, listless, not breathing, with his brothers and sisters walking around him.
Barron and Leyva also are accused of abusing 2 other children. They have pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Anthony had been under the supervision of the LA County Department of Children and Family Service over a period of 3 years. He was being observed between 2013 and 2016. In over that period, at least 13 calls were made by teachers, police, and relatives. The Los Angeles Times reported that the deputy director of the LA County Department of Children and Family Service, Brandon Nichols, previously said that Anthony had told him that he liked boys before he died, but did not reveal who told him. Former Californian Senator Ricardo Lara commented on the similarities between Gabriel and Anthony cases in the documentary. It's homophobia that you don't see. It's not on television. It's not on the street. It's alive in the home. The jury indicated Heather Barron and Karen Ernesto Leyva on October 2018 on charges of murdering Anthony and abusing his 2 brothers. Heather and Karen are being held without bail. Both plead not guilty. They face life imprisonment without the possibility of parole if they are convicted of murder and torture, along with the special circumstances of painful murder by torture. The LA District Attorney Office has dropped its proposal to sentence Heather and Karen to death. Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Atami criticized new District Attorney George Gascon for a series of directives, including one advising that a death sentence is never an appropriate resolution in any case. Jonathan Atami said, "This is not based on new evidence. This is not based on new mitigation or new law. I stand by the decision of the Special Circumstances Committee that I announced to the court 2 years ago."
You may remember the case of 10-year-old Anthony Avalos of Lancaster. Prosecutors say his mother and her boyfriend tortured him to death. Prosecutors were trying for the death penalty, but not anymore because District Attorney George Gascon does not believe in capital punishment. Heather Maxine Barron and her boyfriend Kareem Ernesto Leyva are charged with murder and torture, and up until yesterday it was a special circumstances case. In other words, a conviction could have resulted in the death penalty. The couple is accused of torturing Anthony to death in June of 2018. In court papers, authorities say Barron and Leyva whipped the boy with a belt and a looped cord, held him by his feet and dropped him on his head repeatedly, withheld food from him, and slammed him into furniture and the floor. Deputies and paramedics found the boy unresponsive in the couple's apartment. They told authorities Anthony had fallen, but investigators quickly realized that the death was suspicious and the 2 were booked for murder. Now, LA County District Attorney George Gascon, who took office in December, says he believes a sentence of death is never an appropriate resolution in any case. And so yesterday, he ordered prosecutors to drop their effort to seek the death penalty. Now, the most severe punishment that Leyva and Barron can face, if they are convicted, is life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecutor, Jonathan Hatami, is openly criticizing his boss's decision on Twitter. He says, "This is the major failure with the LA District Attorney's blanket policies. It leaves out entire communities. It doesn't even consider public safety. In every single case, we should individually look at the evidence, the law, the facts, the victim and survivor, and the ultimate goal of justice. We as Angelenos deserve this from our DA. Who voted for this? This is not fair or just." And relatives of Anthony say they are very disappointed. Here's what Anthony's uncle, David Barron, told the LA Times. Quote, "I know the death penalty will not bring Anthony back, but this is one of the worst kinds of crimes you could commit, so it deserves the worst kind of punishment." Anthony would have turned 13 years old on Tuesday of this week. His aunt and uncle will hold a celebration of his life on Saturday in Lancaster, near the apartment where he was abused and killed. Chris?
After his death, Anthony's biological father and siblings filed a lawsuit against the county, the Department of Children and Family Services, and one of its contractors, alleging that social workers willfully ignored concerns about abuse and failed to protect Anthony.
We are following more breaking news. Just moments ago, a judge sentenced the mother of 10-year-old Anthony Avalos and her boyfriend to life in prison for the child's death. It was a horrific case of child abuse that really shocked people across LA County and even beyond that. And it raised a lot of questions about LA County Child Services, and they were supposed to protect him. KCAL News reporter Cara Fenstrom is live with the sentencing. Cara.
Amy, about 80 people showed up and packed this courtroom this morning. Anthony's father, his young siblings, his extended family all came with pictures of him pinned to their chests. The judge told all of them that he believed the biological mother and her boyfriend intended to kill Anthony, and then he handed down the maximum sentence to both of them.
Each defendant is ordered to serve life without the possibility of parole. In count 2, the court imposes a life sentence with a minimum term of 7 years. This sentence is stayed pursuant to
33-year-old Heather Barron and her boyfriend, 37-year-old Kareem Ernesto, who had both already been found guilty of first-degree murder and torture, largely sat in the courtroom today. She showed some emotion when family members say the woman they once loved turned into a monster. Today, some of them spoke to the judge, saying they wanted everyone to know Anthony was loved, and his murder has caused unimaginable hurt and devastation.
Only 30 minutes after Anthony was taken off the machines, he was gone. His little body couldn't fight any longer. I would never be able to give him another hug or kiss. I would never get to tell him how proud he makes me or how much I love him. These two are monsters, and monsters belong in cages. You took someone I saw as a brother, someone I grew up with, someone I shared so many memories with, someone I had so much love for.
Barron and Ernesto had both also been indicted on charges of child abuse involving some of Anthony's 6 half-siblings. Family members say they continue to wake up from nightmares feeling unsafe. Anthony was 10 years old when he died back in 2018. Prosecutors said he'd been brutally beaten, deprived of water, and dropped on his head repeatedly. Prosecutors maintain horrific abuse went on for 5 years at that Lancaster home, with the county receiving at least 13 different reports of incidents like food and water being denied, beatings, sexual abuse, and children being dangled from a stairwell. Sobbing family members say they pleaded with social workers to remove the children from the home, but that their pleas were not heard. The Avalos family did sue LA County, saying the system failed their children, and last year the county settled for $32 million. Now they say they're calling for changes so other children do not have to suffer like they did. And Back here live, also in that courtroom today, was the family of Gabriel Fernandez. You may remember back in 2013, he was also tortured and killed by his biological mother and her boyfriend. These two families did not know each other before these separate tragedies. Now they say they're united in their grief, and they will work together to try and bring about some changes to better protect children. Back to you.
All right, Cara, thank you.
Noah Cuatro, born in 2014, he and his siblings were placed in foster families but returned to the home of their parents, José María Cuatro and Úrsula Elaine Juárez. Noah was raised by a relative for part of his life, after being in foster care for his first 3 months. His great-grandmother, Eva Hernandez, raised him for 6 months. He was then placed in the care of his parents for around 1 year, before being removed from his parents' home due to neglect, Eva Hernandez told the outlet. After another brief period in foster care, Eva looked after him until November 2018, and his parents regained custody.
Lou and Mark, good afternoon. Heartbreaking details to say the least. As this suspicious death investigation continues, we are learning that the great-grandmother of little 4-year-old Noah says that Noah had begged her not to let him be returned to his mother and father.
What did Tiger say? What did Tiger say?
You're looking at video of a vibrant and happy little boy. At the time this video was taken, Noah was living with his great-grandmother. She told us Noah was taken from his mother right after birth and was in and out of foster care until she got him at 3 months old. Eva Hernandez says she raised Noah in a stable household, but the courts decided that he should be returned to his parents at about 9 months. Now, about a year after that, Noah was removed again, his great-grandmother says, because of neglect in the home and malnutrition. Noah then eventually, again in a foster home, in a boys' home, was returned to his great-grandmother, where he lived for more than 2 years, she says, in very stable conditions. But last November, he was once again removed and reunified with his mother and father.
I told the social workers, please, he doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay here, and he begged me. Would hold on to me. He said, don't send me back, Grandma. I don't know. I couldn't do anything. I just had to send him back.
Eva says Noah's mother wouldn't let Noah take any toys or let her see him after that. However, she begged and finally saw Noah 3 months ago for the last time.
He was not the same little boy anymore. He looked so sad and withdrawn. And he wanted to tell me something, but I don't know what he wanted to say. He didn't have the chance, because she was just like looking at him, and he wouldn't say anything. He'd say, Grandma, then he would just shut down. And I kept saying, what's wrong, baby? Tell me, baby. And he wouldn't say it.
She says Noah has an older brother who had also been in and out of foster care, and she says that shortly after that last visit about 3 months ago, she got a tip from family members that Noah was being mistreated, and she says she did warn DCFS and social workers. She said she put a complaint in and said, please go over to the house and check on him, but do it unannounced. She said, please go unannounced. They called her back, she says, and said they let the mother know they were coming ahead of time, and then reported back to the great-grandmother that everything was okay in the home. So back here live, we did reach out to DCFS. Right now, they tell us they can't comment on the case at this time as this investigation continues. And one more note, as this suspicious death investigation continues.
According to the LA Times, the LA County Child Protective Service Office claimed that social workers act appropriately when they return Noah to his parents. Attorney Brian Claypool, who represents Eva Hernandez, has expressed a desire to file a civil lawsuit against the LA County Department of Children and Family Service. The reject complaint claimed that a DSIF employee filed a petition for Noah to be removed from his parents' custody, which was conceived by a judge and then deliberately ignored by the DSIF. An assistant went to the judge and said that this child was at imminent risk. The judge agreed with her, issuing an order that Noah would have to be removed. The SIF never complied with that order.
Attorneys on behalf of Noah Cuatro's family are speaking out following the release of new information. At the center of their case, why wasn't Noah removed from the home after a request was made by social workers? Noah's mother and father are accused of torturing and killing their 4-year-old son.
The NBC4 I-team first reported their arrest last week, and Lolita Lopez is back with us right now with some new details.
Yeah, so why weren't they removed? That is the very question the NBC4 I-team is trying to unravel. How did Noah die also as well? And could something have been done? Now, new documents are helping us get closer to those answers.
Noah Cuatro's social worker was strongly concerned about the 4-year-old's care. A court order filed by the social worker in May asked a judge to remove the boy from his parents' custody, but that never happened. He died 2 months later. Ursula Juarez and Jose Cuatro initially told sheriff deputies Noah drowned at a community pool. They are now accused of their son's murder.
This court order requiring DCFS to have Noah Cuatro examined by a forensic, medical, and psychological examiner within 72 hours of the order was not negotiable.
As the I-team previously reported, 5 people, including the social worker and a supervisor, agreed not to remove Noah. DCFS telling us that its team investigated Noah's case fully, including a medical examination in April. The team was still investigating a sexual abuse allegation made by a family member, but kept Noah with his parents. In court earlier this week, we were there when prosecutors described fresh injuries to Noah's body, consistent with sexual and physical abuse.
This is not right what happened to him. He couldn't defend himself. He's innocent, and they just threw him to the wolves.
And Fernandez there has filed a legal claim against the agency. Now, DCFS says determining and removing a child from a home is a sensitive and difficult decision. After Noah's death, DCFS has now changed its process regarding removal orders, so social workers will have to go through the director himself before deciding if a removal order will not be carried out. Another thing in these documents, the social worker in the case also revealed that others in the family were concerned about Noah's well-being. They said that he was always hungry. She also described him as being coached, denied visits to some relatives, and guys, unavailable sometimes on numerous unannounced visits.
On July 5, 2019, his parents called 911 because Noah drowned in the swimming pool of the apartment complex where they lived. But the couple's story unraveled at Palmdale Regional Medical Center. A responding deputy relied a doctor's finding to a DCFS line social worker. He was taken to hospital, no sign of drowning, no water in the lungs, but there are signs of physical and sexual abuse.
Family members have told the great-grandmother they just don't understand this whole pool theory because they say out there the pool was locked and little Noah would have been too small, they said, to get into that pool on his own. We'll have much more coming up tonight at 6. For now, back to you, Lou and Mark in Hollywood.
According to the autopsy, Noah died of asphyxiation and trauma. The coroner found rib fractures that were healed and sexual assault trauma consistent with sodomization, among other injuries. José María Cuatro and Ursula Elaine Juarez have been charged with murder and torture in addition to these charges. Ursula faces a charge of child abuse in circumstances likely to cause death. Joseph faces a charge of assault on a child causing death and sexual penetration with a child under 10. He is also charged with sexual assault on the same day Noah was killed. Both plead not guilty. Prosecutors allege that Jose hit Noah because he believed Noah was not his biological son. A DNA test was carried out through the autopsy, which determined that Noah was his biological son.
The parents of 4-year-old Noah Cuatro are pleading not guilty to murder and torture charges in connection with his death in July 2019 in Palmdale. Jose Maria Cuatro Jr. and Ursula Lane Juarez called to report Noah drowned in the family pool. He went to the hospital but was pronounced dead the next day. Sheriff Alex Villanueva announced the next week an investigation was underway into Noah's death, and his siblings were taken into protective custody. Cuatro and Juarez face up to life in prison if convicted as charged. Noah's great-grandmother filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Los Angeles County on behalf of herself and Noah's siblings, claiming his death was allowed to happen despite multiple abuse reports. Katie Johnston for CBS LA.
Thereof, a former LA Times reporter and producer of the series presented a startling statistics in the documentary. More than 150 children in LA County with some DSIF involvement in their lives have died from abuse and neglect since Gabriel Fernandez's death in 2013. It's everything that I have for this case. If you know that a child is suffering from a domestic abuse or any kind of abuse, you should call your local child protective service